From Buffalo, Toronto Public Media and WBFO News, this is Buffalo What's Next Producers Picks. Highlights of our weekday discussion on race, diversity, and issues that spring from the Tops Massacre on 5/14. Today, another place, the same journey.
When the tragedy occurred, it was so much shock heard around the community.
What can we learn from South Carolina after the Mother Emmanuel AME Church shooting in 2015?
I think we're still healing. I'll just say that. Again, it's a journey. It doesn't end. It can change. But the intense pain, I would probably say, is dissipated somewhat. But still, we remain hopeful.
Also ahead, KeyBank's Owunwanne on development, the Parent Network on their outreach in the Broadway Fillmore neighborhood, and the Buffalo Police Athletic League with a new program to bring cops and kids together in Buffalo. I'm Angeli Preston. Thanks for being with us. Up first, Jay Moran with Tenelle Jones from the Resiliency Program at the Medical University of South Carolina in Charleston.
On June 17, 2015, a gunman entered the Mother Emmanuel AME Church in Charleston, South Carolina, and shot and killed 9 black people. Joining us right now from South Carolina is Tenelle Jones. Tenelle is a licensed marriage and family therapist and also a licensed addictions counselor and is part of the Resilience Program, as you heard Lynn Bader just mention. And she joins us by phone this morning. Good morning to you, Tenelle.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much for sharing with us here in Buffalo as we work through what happened here on May 14th. If you could, Tenelle, just take us back and try to recall the emotions of Charleston after June 17th, 2015.
Yeah, so obviously when the tragedy occurred, it was so much shock heard around the community, but also so much connectedness, people wanting to be there and support for each other. It actually reminded me of, when 9/11 happened, how people would speak to you right after that. So there was this sense of community. I know there was like a bridge walk where people were walking over, holding hands, speaking about the possibility of hope, healing, and connection. But still so much devastation impacted Charleston community, even to this day. But I think it's inspired a lot of great things as well, again, with a lot of the annual events that have occurred, as well as, now having the International African American Museum coming here. So I think it's a place for people to come and learn more about what happened, but also really focus on who they are and their characters and make some changes as necessary.
Tenelle, you most certainly brought up a lot of points that deem some follow-up questions, but let's talk about what brought our attention to you, the Resilience Program. This is an effort by the Medical University of South Carolina. Tell us about how it originated and what it does.
Yeah, so it originated, obviously, we had to be able to partner with the Mother Emmanuel Church. And so I don't know if people are aware that when the massacre occurred, all of the leadership was in that church at the time, and they were murdered. So they had to establish new leadership, and so that was really hard, like so much grief for the church and so much loss. And so partnering with MUSC and actually also the Department of Mental Health, we created what we called Mother Emmanuel Empowerment Center, which was a building housed right next to the church. And it was a safe space for people to come in. We had so many different programmings available, support groups, just programming around wellness, understanding trauma, just really connecting to, again, the families and the communities. We actually started before it was complete. I would say the Mother Emmanuel Empowerment Center really began during the trial, the United States versus Dylan Ruth trial, is where we really showed our support for the families going through such a difficult time. It's just so hard to put into words because I can't imagine having to go through that and sit through that.
Absolutely. You mentioned the families, and we've heard some from the families here in Buffalo since May 14th. But what about for you? You were right there with many of them. Talk about what they went through, perhaps commonalities and maybe in some ways differences, how they may have differed and how they responded and how they moved through this time after this tragedy.
Yeah, so with grief and loss and trauma, people experience it differently for different reasons. And so, like I said, I think when a lot of them reconnected during the trial, when they came from different states, so I saw a sense of togetherness, and we were in this together during that time. You know, some people, obviously, it was hard for them to want to be involved and engaged, so they kind of like went and focused on, you know, just their own selves and their own family, which is totally understandable. It's interesting because as a therapist doing this work with this type of tragedy, it's not like you kind of have this separation, like we became part of the families. We got to know everybody's, you know, birthday and important life events as they continued on this healing journey for themselves. And for the church, you know, being in the church often and for all events. When they lost a family member, we were present. So it's just so many things happening that I think if you are a therapist getting involved in this, you have to be open to really connecting on a different level versus this professional and client level. It's just opening yourself up to truly be a part of their, I'm going to say, loss and hope, you know.
It's interesting, a way of describing it, like you said, loss and hope, because you do have to move on, right? And it was 7 years ago, but 7 difficult years, I can only imagine, for some of the folks involved here. What about for you? I know we talked yesterday. Previous to this, you were actually the chief operating officer with another organization and joined the resilience program to become one of the counselors involved. How about for you? How has it been for you and for maybe your other counselors as well, working through this? Because like you said, you became very attached to the families.
Yeah, I acknowledge it as an honorable experience, and just grateful that these magnificent beings allowed me to be part of, again, which could be considered one of the most devastating things that I could possibly experience. And so I felt honored in this journey with them, this journey of healing, and was really, again, I never made it about me and my thoughts. So just being fully present with them, that's how I function in this, and still even to this day when we've had these connections with these families for over these amount of years. And so they might still like reach out, and, you know, I check on them when I can. So it's just really been, like I said, phenomenal in that they embraced us. You know, a lot of times when people are hurting and healing, mental health hasn't always been like a focus. And so promoting that it's okay to talk about what you're feeling. It's okay to be part of, you know, the Mother Emmanuel Empowerment Center, to be part of healing has really, really been, I think, significant just in addressing the stigma, which is also, you know, this is a church community, so there is also that kind of, you know, most churches like, hey, we just focus on, you know, what we can get from our higher power versus coming and talking to somebody about what we're feeling. So I think it really opened that door and a space to start to recognize the importance of mental health and getting help, and you can't do this alone.
It's interesting that you talk about mental health, because one of the things that caught me right here in Buffalo, May 14th happened. By the end of May 14th, you know, mental health counselors were omnipresent in the neighborhood around the Tops where 10 people were shot and killed. And you mentioned how sometimes when it comes to mental health, there are those barriers. Can you talk about those and perhaps maybe how some of those barriers maybe hopefully have gone away or at least been eased over the last 7 years?
Yeah, so the barriers, again, of just the stigma, because of this being a faith community, most faith communities are just like, hey, let's just pray about it. Just come and talk to your pastor about what's going on. And I think just, again, like I said, seeing this community really open up to recognizing that they needed more, right? That that we were maybe invited in because of, their faith, if that makes any sense. And so that just kind of lowering that down a little bit was helpful. And now I think what we've seen is, and we provided mental health in so many different ways. We went to them, like they didn't have to come to the Empowerment Center, so we went to where they were. We did phone, we did video, we had different types of community events, anything. One of the events that I really enjoyed doing was like our annual fall, we call it the Good Grief Youth Fall Festival, and it was a space for children to come to one of the county parks and just do lots of work, like art, and create like creative arts exercises and games, and they could connect to each other and still remember their loved ones in many ways. So we did different things like that, and so it wasn't, again, maybe just like this whole traditional, you come in and you sit down and you talk. I think that was because we were open and flexible. It allowed people to, like I said, just really accept that it was okay to come in and be part of healing and support and get support as needed.
This morning on Buffalo What's Next, we're talking with Tenelle Jones, a licensed marriage and family therapist and licensed addictions counselor. She is part of the Resilience program out of Charleston, South Carolina, established by the Medical University of South Carolina following June 17th, 2015. That is when a gunman entered the Mother Emmanuel AME Church in Charleston, South Carolina, and shot and killed 9 black people. Tenelle, of course, one thing that is still to come here in Buffalo that you have experience in Charleston, the trial of Dylan Roof, who was convicted of these killings and I believe sentenced to 2 death sentences, one of which is under appeal right now. But that is an aside factor. I wonder, of course, if it was probably like this in Charleston, for the first week, 2 weeks afterwards, a high presence of national media that probably went away for the most part. Did they come back for that trial, and how was that for the people involved, the victims' families?
Yeah, there were so many different types of media present for the trial, and we, again, the team that was present for the trial and for the families, we wanted to, make a safe space for them to talk to the media if they wanted to, but also to shield them, because many of them had not experienced going to court and having to face the person who took their loved ones away. So we kind of were like protectors for the family. But yeah, there were a lot of media present wanting to talk and wanting to share their stories. And as mental health counselors, we wanted to help them if they wanted to talk to them. So we, if we created a safe space for them to practice, and just also giving them like, hey, it's okay if you say no. Like, it's okay to set boundaries. It's okay to not answer certain questions, even if you do want to talk to them. So we provided them with a lot of different tools to cope and just engage in self-care during that time.
I'm wondering if that's the advice you would give to Buffalo as we move forward here. Like I said, we're still some time off from any potential trial, but there's a lot to come, obviously, for the folks here in Buffalo. You know that better than anybody, dealing with this now for the last 7 years. But what kind of advice would you give to the community of Buffalo in terms of trying to help those people most directly involved with this shooting?
Yeah, I think, again, creating spaces that allows them to come, again, thinking outside the box. Things don't have to be kind of routine, so being flexible in how you deliver support. If it's during the trial, I would encourage to have as much support as you possibly can for everybody, everybody's needs, to help meet everybody's needs during that time. And I would say, I think the biggest thing is just recognizing that everybody grieves differently, and so to not have expectations that people are going to present a certain way. And for those of you who are involved in supporting the families in Buffalo, as much as you can, make it about them and not about, I know most people probably are feeling pain, but one of the things that I think is helpful is I was not directly impacted by the Mother Emmanuel tragedy, so it definitely made it easier for me to be part of the support and the healing team. And so for providers who are, I can't imagine they may have their own grief and trauma as well. So just be mindful of that and making the healing about those people who were impacted directly.
Yeah, thank you very much for saying that, because it does bring me to a topic I wanted to maybe try to discuss with you and get your perspective. This particular program started in the aftermath of the May 14th shootings here in Buffalo. And one of the topics that we discuss behind the scenes a little bit is we do not have any wish to trigger more trauma for this community. Talk about how to balance that particular element, I guess, and maybe what you saw with some of the family members. Did the higher attention, did it hurt some of these people? Or can you maybe take us through that a little bit?
I think from just the overall, not being able to speak to everyone individually,
Right.
obviously, I think overall, most people felt the love and support during that time. But I'm pretty sure it was still hard because, these tragedies happen, but before the tragedy, there was also probably a lot of other things happening in everybody's lives. It might have been harder for families who lived out of town and had to travel especially like during the trial. Even though the support was there, I think it still was probably hard because maybe they had to be away from other family members to be here. So just so many different dynamics because it was so many people, which I'm pretty sure that you guys are experiencing in Buffalo, the different people, the different backgrounds, the different lifestyles, and trying to accommodate all of that can be, could be, I think, a hefty task.
Right.
So, yeah.
You did mention, like you said, that the bridge walk was a very memorable description by you that came afterwards, kind of a community support development in Charleston to try to help move past June 17th, 2015. What about some of the other responses from the community? Just generally speaking, what did you see?
I will say I remember hearing about a group of people, and I think they called themselves the unsung heroes after a couple of years, because they say not a lot of people were aware of when the massacre occurred and Dylan Roof was caught and identified as the perpetrator in this tragedy. There was a group of individuals who went through the communities, from my understanding, encouraging people to not go into being violent. Like, let's just focus on healing and not cause, other challenges with riots and just the anger. Because, of course, everybody felt so angry, right, that this has happened, especially in a place like where most people have been taught you're supposed to be the safest in church. So I'm aware of these group of individuals going around and making sure that the community focused on peace and healing and not expressing their anger in unhealthy ways. Let me say that, because I don't think there's anything wrong with being angry, but not expressing that anger in unhealthy ways.
Is June 17th, 2015, is it marked? Is there an annual event on the anniversary? Can you talk about that a little bit, please?
Yeah, so each person that was lost in the tragedy was given their own special day over I think it's 10 days, marking that full week and a half. And then there are community events around in the community about, activities and communities events to address what happened, again, to show support of healing and just maybe private family events as well to mark that this change has, like I said, impacted their lives.
And then finally, how is Charleston today, more than 7 years after June 17th, 2015?
I think every time, unfortunately, we hear about these other mass violence incidents, Charleston is reminded of what happened, right? And even the media will bring up Dylan Roof in some way, shape, or fashion. So I think we're still healing. I'll just say that. Again, it's a journey. It doesn't end. It can change. But the intense pain, I would probably say, is dissipated somewhat. but still we remain hopeful.
And then I also almost forgot to ask about the church, Mother Emmanuel. What is its status today?
Well, during the pandemic, I'm pretty sure that they were doing services online, I think, and now they're doing a lot of restructuring and construction. But I hear that they're still hanging in there and going strong.
Counselor Tenelle Jones. Back in Buffalo now, where Dave Debo is with KeyBank's Owunwanne, one of the people on the east side with boots on the ground with several programs.
One of those programs is called East Side Commercial Districts Program, a grant program that provided grant dollars to business owners that own commercial properties for interior and exterior improvements to their property. And that was to help fight blight and abandonment. And the hope is that once we were able to do this, you could then encourage more investments on the east side. Another program that we actually run that was incredibly successful, at least I spent an inordinary amount of time on that program, is what we call the Community-Based Real Estate Development Training Program. And it was basically a real estate development course, 19 to 23 weeks, where we put folks, aspiring developers that own commercial properties on the east side through this course in partnership with UB.
Oh, now see, when you first described it, I thought it would be home ownership education. You're talking about how to invest in an area that needs the investment.
Correct.
Okay.
But more importantly, how to get the folks who live in those neighborhoods to drive the economic revitalization of their own neighborhoods. So we're talking about folks who own commercial properties, but just to not necessarily have the wherewithal on what to do with them. So we put them through the equivalent of a master's level real estate development training program to teach them the super nuts of commercial building development. And I think we are now in the third iteration of that program, and graduates, after graduation, they have access to funds set aside to help them develop properties that they may own or do infill projects.
I don't want to be a pessimist here, but has it worked? Because anyone who goes to the east side, I think, still sees vacant buildings, still sees a little bit of blight, still sees a lack of investment.
Well, yeah, so the program started about 3 years ago. And obviously the ills of the east side, the challenges
are bigger than any one program. No, right. I realize that when I asked the question.
And those things, do take time. But I think it's a right start. And I think eventually though the fruits of those labors will start to pay off.
Small seeds in the ground, maybe a sprout, but not a tree yet.
Yes.
Okay. Then let's fast forward to 514. The TOPS shuts down. The community talks a lot about the fact that there's a food desert there. Some even call it food apartheid. The only supermarket in approximately 3 miles is no longer part of the equation. You were boots on the ground. What did you see?
So 514 happened on a Saturday. I was actually outside working on my car. I got text messages, I got phone calls, and I wasn't entirely sure what was going on. Sure. And it was when I finally got another text message that someone told me that, there's been mass shooting on the east side. And I was just completely numb. But the next day, despite being very, very angry about the situation, I realized that I had to do something. And I knew that I was in a position to do something because of my current role as the corporate responsibility officer and community relations manager for KeyBank. I made a few phone calls. So I spoke with Candace Moppins. I think Candace was the third person whom I spoke with. And I asked her, what do we do? The only supermarket on the east side is no longer, and who knows how long it's going to take for it to come back online. What do we do? How can I help? How can we help? And she told me that they have a 10-passenger van that is out there in the parking lot that they've used for delivery services for seniors. And sometimes they use it to take seniors to grocery stores to pick up stuff. So I said, great. So
let's fill it with food.
Let's fill it with food. And she said, well, unfortunately, it has flat tires. So it's out of commission at the moment. So I said to her, oh, so what's the plan? And I think she said something to the effect of, tomorrow's Monday, we're going to get it to a mechanic shop and fix it. And I said to her, I don't think we can wait till tomorrow. Let's fix that now. So she said, what are your ideas? Got off the phone with her, called a buddy of mine who owns a tire shop.
There you go.
And he told me if you can get the truck here, we will take care of it. Excited, got off the phone with him, called Candace, and I said to Candace, we can get this fixed today. And she said, okay, what's the plan? And I said, we have to get it to a tire shop on Bailey and Walden. And she said, how are we going to get it there? I was like, oh, great questions. Call back my friend. And I said, would you happen to know a tow truck? And he said, yes, here's my buddy's contact information. Call him and let him know what's going on. I called his friend, and he said, this would typically cost upwards of $200, but I'll give you a discount based on the situation. And I said, sure, I can handle that. I ran over there, and by the time I got there, they were already putting the 10-passenger van on a flatbed, and I drove with them to the shop, and they fixed the tires, and I paid the tow truck, and I called Candace. The van is ready. Let's
food delivery started the next day?
Exactly.
Wow.
Yep.
How big is the need? How many people did you deliver to?
I'm not sure. That's something that I would have to check in with Candace, because once I did that, I realized there's other needs out there as well and other organizations that are doing things. So I just kept it moving. But I have stayed in contact with her. As a result, we managed to put together this farmers market.
Do you think food is maybe one of the most important ones, but is it the biggest concern in the community right now?
It is a big concern, but I also believe another major concern, at least what I've been hearing on the ground, is just access to jobs, access to good-paying jobs. And this past weekend, I had several conversations with folks, and I believe I heard several times hands-on internship program, hands-on, means of providing skills to young people on the east side. So I think those are some of the things that we need to see more of on the east side to just move things forward.
That's Owunwanne. This is Buffalo What's Next Producer Picks. Recent interviews from WBFO's daily podcast and discussion program on race, education, and our shared humanity. With so much attention on the lack of resources on the east side, let's pause now to talk about a new resource that moved in there. Kimberly Kadziolka and Bradford Watts are with the Parent Network. New to the Broadway-Fillmore neighborhood, they discuss the move and their mission with Jay Moran.
We're going to be talking a little bit about disabilities and about how parents and families are helped out when one of their children, perhaps, has needs. But Kimberly, why don't you just give us the definition then to start of a Parent Network of Western New York?
Sure. Thank you so much. So Parent Network of Western New York exists to help parents and families of children with disabilities who need to access services in Western New York. A lot of the focus of our work is on educational advocacy. So we will work with families who perhaps their children aren't getting the services that they need, or they might need more services. So we'll assist them in advocating with the school district.
What kind of services are available?
So we will provide one-on-one support. So if a person needs specific assistance, perhaps sitting in on a CSE meeting, a special education meeting for their child, they don't have the skills right now to advocate for their child. So we'll help them and coach them on how to do that. We have support groups, so parents who have ongoing concerns that they want to talk to other families with and to provide support, so we'll do that. We also provide, if a person, let's say a person has a disability, but that hasn't been formally diagnosed as a disability, our eligibility navigator will help them to gather all the paperwork that's necessary to advocate or to access services in those service systems. We provide behavior support. So if a family's struggling with a child's behavior, our behavior specialist will go in right into the home and help them to understand what the child's trying to communicate and how to best meet that child's needs. We also provide a lot of educational workshops and trainings. So we, not only to families, we have over 70 different training curricula that we can provide to families, but to educators, to academic staff, to paraprofessionals and professionals in the disability field, and just to the community in general. So a lot of different training that we do. And finally, we just have a plethora of online resources. So if you go to our website at Parent Network Western New York, or parentnetworkwny.org, you can just navigate our website for different resources.
When you talk about identification, and Bradford, you can perhaps chime in on this as well. Is that an issue? Is it an issue when it comes to identifying if it's your child or your brother, niece, nephew, whatever the case may be, that person might have some disability that qualifies them, that makes them in need for these services?
Yeah, I agree. That I think that it's important to understand, and it's different on varying cultural
sure, of course.
Levels in terms of how families will deal with that. It's important that the Parent Network provides that type of opportunity, that flexibility, has incredible staff that can begin to help in that process. As a young parent myself at the time, it was a daunting process to come into a room of those that have these professional letters behind their names,
sure.
and many won't look like I look like, and they're telling me all of these things that I'm not sure of why you've selected my child for, and then you're also saying that this child will do this and that, and telling me that I need to follow along with what they're saying. To have a great organization to come in and help and give you the tools and resources to help you navigate that is vital. And it's important when a home, a family is facing other challenges and struggles, and now they're dealing with, a loved one and child or a family member that may be struggling in that area.
And when it comes to that, reaching out for that help and getting that help, a key part also is, again, breaking down the barriers.
Mm-hmm.
Parent Network relocated to the Broadway Fillmore neighborhood, 2 years ago, maybe?
Yes, in 2020.
What prompted that move?
Sure. So about 6 years ago,
Yeah.
A group of agencies came together and said, we really want to do a collaborative model and provide services, a one-stop shop, if you will. And so it was EPIC, Every Parent Influences Children, and the Mental Health Advocates. They were the three core agencies, along with the Learning Disabilities Agency, which is recently merged with Canaletian to become the Beyond Support Network. So those four agencies started looking at this model, doing all the research and the work, finding a location. But it was a very intentional decision to move into the Broadway Fillmore area because we recognize that different pockets in the city of Buffalo, there's a great underserved population. Mm-hmm. So the opportunity came that we got a fantastic building there, and we moved in with the intent to really work and focus on providing more services to those folks in that area, as well as other areas on the east side.
What about outreach then? I mean, obviously, just having the location there is key, and no, there's no doubt about that. Mm-hmm. But what about how do you get out into a neighborhood that has changed dramatically in the last few years and has also changed over the last couple of generations?
Sure. I mean, the Broadway Fillmore area is so transitional in that there's a lot of refugees and immigrants that live in that area. So, and I think, but it's also what's unique about that area is it's also so many people in Western New York identify as being from that neighborhood myself.
Yes,
My grandmother lived in that neighborhood, so I'm from that area. So I think there's a sense of pride that makes it a tad bit easier for us to go out and do that outreach. But we do a lot of outreach in whether we're partnering with organizations that are from that area, and we'll table at events, do those things, working with the schools in that area. So there's definitely an intentional outreach to reach those areas. Plus the building itself, we do things like having a farmer's market a couple days a week. Jericho Road organizes that. They're the health center that's in the building as well. We're talking about doing trick-or-treating in the neighborhood and those types of things. Mm-hmm. But sometimes it's just getting out and being part of the community. I've lunched the Broadway Market, regularly and accessing those services. So, really it's that the presence is important, but the outreach has to be intentional.
We're talking with Kimberly Kadziolka. She's the executive director of the Parent Network of Western New York, and with her, Bradford Watts, who is the co-chair of the board for the Parent Network of Western New York. Cultural differences come into play here, don't they? Right? You were talking about refugees, but let's just talk about maybe going back to Bradford, your experience. Like you said, back in the early '80s, you walked into a room. Everybody there didn't look like you, but they wanted you to trust.
Exactly, and I don't mean anything disparaging in terms of our school systems are doing the best that they can, and they're doing the best in terms of providing as much support to such different cultures, different backgrounds, and different disabilities. So I want to make that clear.
Sure.
It was just when you're a young person, you're single, you're trying to do the best in terms of you can for your child. It can be daunting when you know that you've got a room of folks that you have no knowledge of, and you got to build the relationship. So that was the important thing for me, which is part of what I always do in terms of that, is try to, as Kim was mentioning before, make that engagement opportunity to learn and engage and get there to be a discourse of conversation around my loved one.
Right.
And so that was successful. I have to say that. But I can see, especially being a product, Kim and I both are proud East Buffalo, East Side products. They come out into this neighborhood with a sense of pride, with a sense of determination to be of service. And so a lot of times now that we see the change in the dynamic of the culture that's around there, to have a Jericho Road Ministries that is in this building and bringing in other populations and cultures into this area and arena. But there's a proud, I think, history in terms of how East Buffalo, East Side always was this melting pot, I think. And I think that was something that is inherent in making the engagement process somewhat easier, but I think also necessary. I think it's that hidden gem. A lot of times there takes a lot of pressure. I'm glad this show is here because we see that, in this time of what has transpired after May 14th, there's been a lot of attention, but there's been constant pressure that's been over on in this area of the city. And I think it may have culminated in such a tragic end in terms of what happened that day, but it's also been, I think, that pressure point to where we're seeing products of the community for service really shining a light and creating this gem that has been hidden here on this side of town for so long. And I think it's bringing forth an intent to be of service.
Bradford Watts and Kimberly Kadziolka from the Parent Network. We end today with Dave Debo and Nekia Kemp from the Buffalo Police Athletic League.
Most people know us for leagues, so basketball leagues, baseball leagues.
Sports stuff during the warmer months. Yep.
And in the past 5 years, we've gone into schools and provided after-school programming with sports clinics and camps. So we've kind of dibbled and dabbled in a whole lot.
The programming probably has not changed, but I imagine some of the content has changed after May 14th. Talk about that.
Oh, absolutely. I think that, really making sure that all of our programs have a social and emotional component, that we're really looking at the whole child. So we began to look at not just the physical fitness piece, but also the nutrition piece, also the mental health piece. So all of that, making sure that our youth have everything that they need in order to function every day.
What are you seeing? What kind of problems are they bringing to the table, perhaps now, that they wouldn't have had last year at this time?
I think, even coming out of COVID, it was really difficult. I think we saw a spike in just anxiety and stress. Little kids having a lot of stress and anxiety and not really knowing how to channel their feelings. And you see with youth sports, a lot of sports allow kids to get out their anger, their aggression, their feelings. They give them a chance to be a leader, teamwork, communication skills. So you begin to see a lot of those things helping through children participating in sports.
More elbows on the court?
More elbows on the court, but we've had the opportunity to be trained with the police officers. So restorative practices has become a huge part of all of our programming. So we're able to have those restorative circles before really, getting at the heart of what kids need, what their feelings are, and how they can manage throughout the day, and giving them tools that they can use to kind of manage their own behaviors.
Talk a little bit more about that. What does that look like? We've had the discussion about restorative justice in schools, but you apply it a little differently, I imagine. Is it a quick circle before each game?
It's definitely a circle beforehand, because I think you need to establish the rules, establish the respect level. Then there's also times where you do need to pull a player aside and have a conversation with them, whether it's a program, a camp or clinic, or even day camp. We've run day camps for the past 6 years where we have youth in a comprehensive summer camp from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. So having a child all day and making sure that, again, they have the tools that they need in order to function and be productive.
What ages are we talking about here?
So we provide programming starting at about 5 years old, all the way up to about 21. So we provide opportunities for our youngest campers in participating in summer camps, which are fully comprehensive, not just sports, but also academic camps. And then all the way up to age between 14 and 21, providing them employment opportunities with our partnership with the City of Buffalo.
Do you see a difference in the issues that you have to deal with based on the age of the child you're dealing with?
Oh, absolutely. I think that, different age groups come with different issues, especially, our youngest babies. They may not know what their problems are, what their issues are, but they're displaying it through behaviors. And as you get older, I think our teenagers really respect the fact that we listen to them and giving them the opportunity to have a platform. We're actually going to launch a new program that we've kind of borrowed from Detroit PAL, where it's community conversations between youth and law enforcement.
How does it work? What does it look like? What happens? What do they do? And how would it translate here?
So Ford Motor Company Foundation has really supported Detroit PAL over the past few years, especially in the midst of COVID and social unrest. So this program was a program basically that was born out of 2020, beginning of pandemic, beginning of social unrest. A lot our country was going through, and still is going through at that time. So Critical Conversations is really allowing youth to have a platform to talk about their feelings towards law enforcement. Not just their feelings, but their perceptions, their thoughts, their ideas, all of that in their own words, and giving them that platform and having police officers listen to that and take that information internally and be able to use that in order to improve their relationships with young people.
Is it a matter of them just kind of listing their perceptions of police and then having the police say, no, that's right, no, that's not?
It's a guided curriculum. So the questions are very crafted to lead the conversations of children's true perspective on law enforcement.
What kind of issues do they touch on?
Things like what happens when you get pulled over. How do you feel? What do you do? What do you think you should do? What should you not do? And being able to have those conversations openly, and having the officers explain how they feel. A lot of them feel nervous. They don't, want an altercation. They're trained to protect themselves. So there's two sides to the coin to that. And being able to understand both perspectives keeps our youth safe. It'll keep our youth safe. It'll keep our officers safe and keep the integrity of their job. And what they're supposed to do is serve and protect the community.
And what is the target age?
Our target age here in Buffalo is going to be 14 to 19. So basically 9th through 12th graders we'll be working with.
And that's an age where I imagine they have had some interface with law enforcement already.
Yes, they may have. They may or they may not have had.
Right, but that could make the conversation completely different.
It definitely.
Less theoretical.
Yes. Well, different than having a conversation with a 10-year-old.
Yeah.
And that's part of, again, why PAL is so unique. And that, us going into neighborhoods and, a 10-year-old saying, ooh, who did, what happened? Because they see a police officer and think something bad is happening when this officer is there just to play kickball. Just to play volleyball, just to interact with them in a positive way, because normally they have not, even as a 10-year-old, have seen a situation where the only time they've seen a police officer is mom got pulled over, or they came to my house looking for someone, or a domestic violence situation. It's never been a positive experience. They don't come into the school to just have a conversation with the kids normally. So now we're trying to change that outlook, change that perspective, and really talk about the job at hand, the job at what they're supposed to do, especially in our community.
And this program is launching in October?
It is launching in October. We're having a press conference on October 4th. And so that is going to be an opportunity and a platform for our teenagers to actually talk a little bit about some of their fears, some of their things that they've been thinking about, some questions that they may have, because at the end of the day, we want our community safe.
Do you think, and this is almost a rhetorical question because you wouldn't be doing it if you didn't think there was a need, but do you think that the average kid has problems relating to the average cop?
I think so. I think police-community relations is really important. I mean, statistics have shown with more community policing on the streets, with more police officers engaging in the community with parents and with kids, you're starting to see a decrease in crime because they're starting to trust the police. They're starting to have those conversations and feel protected. So I do think that it definitely has an impact on our community.
Nekia Kemp is here. She's the director of the Buffalo Police Athletic League. Talk to me about specifically the area around Jefferson Avenue. What are you seeing there? What does the community need right now?
I think the community needs a lot. Not that it didn't need it before, but I think that right now the community is really hurting. And I think it's hurting not just emotionally, and mentally. I think it's hurting financially. There was a lot of dollars put in to the immediate issues and the aftermath of this horrible tragedy. And I think that right now we're really feeling the impact on the financial crisis that the city is having right now. So definitely there's a lot more work to be done.
And by financially, you mean just basic business investment? What's the issue there?
Definitely. Business investments, youth investment dollars, focusing on jobs, and building up that area because food security is an issue, financial security is an issue, and really building up that area. It really just exposed a lot of what is needed specifically on the east side of Buffalo.
Would one big, large factory help? I mean, if we were able to place, I don't know, something there, not necessarily storefronts, but one big silver bullet something that could employ a lot of people. Buck back against that argument. Would that help?
I think anything would help.
Okay.
That's a plus to the community, but I also think putting supports in there, because if you're going to put something in there, you're going to need to make sure that people are trained for jobs, that you have an educational system that can support the educational pieces. Working parents, you want to make sure there's daycare readily available. You want to make sure that there's quality programs and supports around all of those areas. So you can't just say, here's the magic bullet, here it is, without addressing all of the issues.
In part, that's why I asked the question, because you're right. You're looking at it much more holistically.
Oh,
There's
absolutely.
a bunch of things that you say we need to do.
There's a ton. I mean, we, at Police Athletic League have dabbled in, quite a few different things where we see that there's a need, such as bike helmets. People don't think that there's a big thing, but we give away thousands of bike helmets every year because traumatic brain injury is prevalent. It's a thing. I mean, people ride their bikes and scooters and you fall and you hit your head and you have a traumatic brain injury. injury, and ECMC started seeing an uptake in brain injuries, and so therefore we started, giving away bike helmets. Another example, we started with car seat checks and giveaways. The pandemic and then this crisis on Jefferson happened, and immediately folks were, okay, well, we need to get food. They were traveling with their infants in ride shares with no car seat. So these are things that people don't think about, but these are areas where we know that there's a high rate of children who die due to car accidents because they're not properly in car seats.
I have heard a lot of people say that they will never enter that TOPS. How then do we get more alternative outlets, be it the African American Food Co-op or I don't know, an Aldi's, a Dash's, a Wegmans? Right. How do we get something else in there?
I think that those conversations need to be had on an upper level, and I'm sure that they are happening, and those things are happening. But what we've done as part of our organization, again, I mentioned that we've looked at food security as well. We've actually started this past summer, actually during COVID, we started doing virtual cooking classes. I think it's really important that families understand that they can grow their own food and how they can grow their own food, and having access to, once you grow your own food, what exactly do you do with a zucchini? What exactly do you do with a tomato? How can you create healthy meals that are affordable? So I think that that's a part of the holistic, whole child, again, piece too, not just offering the sports activities, because we were at Johnny B. Wiley Stadium and we were there, that day, creating, playing flag football, at the stadium right down the street, and hundreds of kids participating. But how do we make sure that those hundreds of kids participating in a sports activity, that they have those other resources, such as connecting them with food and food security?
What kind of mental health programs do you still see the need for?
We're continuing restorative practices. We're continuing our partnership with Say Yes Buffalo to provide social and emotional support and counseling for our kids all summer. We actually continued programming that next weekend after that incident on May 14th, because we felt the need to be there for kids, and we felt the need to not live in fear. And so we continue to offer programming for those families and kids who wanted an outlet or wanted to talk to somebody, and making sure that we were readily available to continue pressing on with what we do.
I don't know if this violates any confidentiality for you to tell me, but what kind of issues do they raise? You talked at the top of the program about anxiety. Do they just come to you and say, I'm scared?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think as adults, we're scared too.
How do you respond?
We live in fear, but, it's important to keep explaining to children and even adults that, I believe in faith in a higher power. And so we really want to make sure that while they're with us, that they feel safe, and that they feel it's okay to feel. It's okay to express your feelings. It's okay to cry. It's okay to not want to participate today, and give them space and grace. I think that that's the best way we can put it, is giving our youth space and grace to grieve and deal with what they're dealing with on their own terms.
Do you talk about race? The shooter obviously targeted people because of the color of their skin.
Absolutely. Because we're a youth sports organization, we have a lot of diversity. We have kids that come from all over. We have tennis camp that runs at Delaware Park, and we have a lot of diverse programs. And so our children are used to being around our children. And so we have to have the difficult conversations about hate, because that's really what it boils down to. Children are taught to hate, and it's a choice.
And simultaneously, do you teach children that there are people out there that will hate them?
Absolutely. I think
how do you address that?
it's part of life. You can't walk out the door and think that every day is going to be, roses and everything is going to be perfect. I mean, you just don't know. You can't control other people's actions. You can only control yours. If you show love to people, then you hope that they will show love back to you. And that's what we want our kids to see. Being a good teammate, being a good player at a game, having fun, being a child, just living your life and having a good time is what we want to instill within our kids.
I've heard people say that part of the solution is, quite frankly, just more integration. Instead of my wife and I going out to Orchard Park for a steak, find a steakhouse on Jefferson, that kind of thing. I'm trying to remember the one, I was at Juneteenth, and right behind the park there, Black by Demand. Having a sandwich there, getting into the neighborhood, doing more into the neighborhood for the sake of integration.
Right.
Do you think that'll work?
I think that it has worked in some ways. I think, again, that there are many solutions out there that are viable solutions. Definitely supporting the businesses within the community is huge. I know that there has been campaigns across the city, like Buy Black Buffalo, getting folks to come out and really support, because I think, we want to economically boost, but also, again, bring children. We run basketball leagues, which was one of the first things PAL is known for. But one of the unique things about Buffalo PAL is we not only create these spaces for youth to come together, we offer diverse spaces, because guess what? These kids from Orchard Park, West Seneca, East Amherst, they come and they play children who reside in the city of Buffalo, who may go to a Burgard or may go to, they get the opportunity because they don't play. They would never play teams that are not within their league, within their school systems, because the way the school system is set up, but we won't go there. But
we won't. I was going to ask
go there.
You. Okay.
But PAL offers a unique opportunity for those youth to interact with kids they would never otherwise interact with, because they wouldn't interact with them.
Yeah.
So now they're all coming to a McNeeka Center on Clinton Avenue, and they're playing all day, and they have the opportunity. They say, oh, we love this. We love bringing our teams here. They get to play the best of the best. We were playing McKinley today, or we're playing South Park today, and they get a chance to interact with other students, other kids, and they're having these conversations on and off the court.
Do the kids drag the parents along? Part of the reason I asked my earlier question about integration is the broader discussion.
Right.
Yeah, it's certainly cool that you'll have a black and a white on the court together. But beyond that, is there a space there for that sort of discussion? Certainly a need, but is there a space for it?
It absolutely happens, because we all know that sports is the great unifier. I mean, when you talk about the Buffalo Bills, and it doesn't matter what color you come from, what race, what background, what socioeconomic, it cuts across all of those barriers. So when you're at a high school basketball game and you're sitting there and you see two sets of parents, their camaraderie, they're doing high fives, they're laughing, they're having a good time, and you start to see friendships form among the parents of an Orchard Park parent and a parent that lives on the east side of Buffalo. And you don't get that often.
Forgive my skepticism, but that actually happens.
Oh, absolutely.
Wow, okay.
Absolutely. There's kids who've been in leagues for years. Their parents have become friends. They visited each other. I mean, it's definitely happening.
Talk about the broader discussion that needs to be had.
I think the broader discussion that needs to be had with our children. I think that adults are a lot of them are set in their ways and may not change, but as a child, you have the opportunity to mold a mind. You have an opportunity to give them an experience that they wouldn't otherwise have. And so, programs like Buffalo PAL allow these children to have experiences that they would not be able to have, and be able to have these interactions that they may not be able to have because they can't afford it, because it all comes down to the socioeconomic status as well. You can afford what you can afford. Can you go to the Buffalo Zoo? Would I be able to take my 5 kids to the Buffalo Zoo? Would I be able to afford to take them all and buy tickets to the Buffalo Zoo? You may or may not, but that's a socioeconomic barrier that allows only certain groups to take advantage of certain things. So knocking down those barriers barriers is a huge thing that we need to focus on, is making the playing field level for all of our kids.
That's Nekia Kemp. This has been Buffalo What's Next Producer Picks. Highlights of WBFO's daily discussion program. We're on the air each morning at 10 with a replay each night at 9. You can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts or just listen on demand at WBFO.org. I'm Angela Preston. Thank you for listening.